Well, for some analysis, we're now joined by Zambian economist Yusuf Dadio. Thank you so much indeed for joining us. Always good to talk to you. Thanks for your time.
It's great to be with you, Peter.
So e-commerce has been one of those challenging issues for not just our countries on the continent, but around the world because of its nature. You have a company based in America or in the UK, and yet their products are consumed everywhere by the click of a button.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, here in Zambia, we're enjoying watching Netflix, even though we pay the bills abroad. There are no taxes being levied on Netflix here in Zambia, and Amazon, Showmax, and many other online services. And of course, even if you look at the social media companies that will charge for certain services that they offer, these services are being paid across borders without them registering in the local Zambian tax revenue collection system. So clearly there's a whole world of commerce going on out there of which our tax authorities are oblivious to, because they have a system that picks up a physical company that's located in our tax jurisdiction, and they follow them up, they get them to register, and they get them to pay taxes. But for these online services, it's clearly an area that our revenue authority needs to start coming up with some innovative way of being able to tax them for the services that they're providing to the Zambian people in the Zambian economy.
So what vehicles might be used? And we're seeing Rwanda is trying to levy value-added tax. Is that one of the ways? And how effective can it be? Because once you start talking about an online environment, you only have to shift your VPN and all sorts of things, and you're in a different world.
Absolutely. And I mean, we've seen this happen like during election times in many countries where the government of the day tries to prevent certain social media groups from being able to dialogue about elections, maybe give preemptive information on the performance of various election activities, and they try to block them. But as you say, the VPNs are shifted to other countries, and then finally you find that it's not possible to block them. But clearly what we are seeing is that there are initiatives to try to see how they can collect taxes from these online services. And yes, the idea that government generally has is to have a portal for Zambia where all these services come through Zambia, through some kind of Zambian management system that can monitor what is going on in terms of these online services and be able to tax them. But clearly it's not easy. We've seen television and radio services move from physically being in Zambia to being in other parts of the world and still being able to penetrate the Zambian market. So to that extent, there are initiatives underway. In fact, there's a project right now that is being run through the US government support, a US aid financed program, where they are looking at different mechanisms for tax collection. In other words, to broaden the tax base by looking at other services that are being offered that are currently not taxed. And I'm pretty sure the online services is going to be one of the targets of this project.
And I would imagine local network operators that perhaps do the cable networks, they probably think this is long overdue because they're having to compete with these companies that are not paying any taxes.
Oh, absolutely. But what we are not seeing is we're not seeing that the global access to information technology is benefiting Zambia from the perspective of subscriptions. Yes, It's possible to get a lot of information via, Googling or YouTubing or many of the other online information platforms, but access to the internet, in other words, paying subscriptions to get data bundles, to be able to get online, those ones tend to be very much domestically hosted. And of course, the cost of going online itself is what is prohibitive. So we'd like to see a situation where not only are we getting information coming from outside in terms of services to the Zambian people, but maybe even the service itself. Yeah. In the same way radio and television has now gone into the Ethernet. You don't need to have a physical radio station on the ground to be able to have access to this kind of service. We'd like to be able to see internet access developing in that particular way, because that means that every Zambian can have access to online services without having to go through a domestic service provider that is fairly exorbitant in their charges.
So the thing about tax systems is that they should be reasonably fair and equitable. But now we may have a situation where a Netflix will pay tax, and then smaller operators will not, because the nature of their business is not like a subscription where you can trace the credit card number and it's a regular transaction and that kind of thing. How do we get around these obvious inequalities that are going to happen?
Well, it's a very difficult one because, for example, a country like Zambia, which is a member of the Southern African Development Community Free Trade Area, as well as a member of the Common Market for East and Southern Africa Free Trade Area, and as well as a member of the Continental Free Trade Area, it means that we've got these treaties across Africa that compels us to treat business houses in Zambia and in the on the continent as equals. And beyond that, we also have what we call the double taxation agreements, the treaties we've signed with countries like Ireland and others, where if those companies that are in those countries, if they're providing a service to Zambia and they're being taxed in their own country, they cannot be double taxed by being taxed in Zambia. So there's a lot of policy and agreements and treaties that we've signed that actually tie up our hands. And I think one of the things we need to do is we need to pull out of some of these agreements and cancel some of these treaties so that we can go back to the drawing board and find out how we can get our fair share, get equity in the global trading system. At the moment, it's all targeted at the big players, the European, North American, and of course now Asian players have taken up 99% of this space and leaving a continent like Africa with very little to work with. So it's an uphill battle, but it's something that we have to be strategic about in terms of what agreements we want to stay with and what agreements we need to pull out of because they're not in our best interests.
All right, and perhaps finally, I guess we also have to be careful that, we don't have governments who use these rules to abuse their citizens, where you start taxing things like SMSs or when you send money to each other via SMS. And then you, as a government, say, because you're trying to raise money, charge a fee for that.
Absolutely, but the elephant in the room, Peter, is that these are distractions. They become distractions from the real elephants in the room. A country like Zambia is the world's third largest producer of copper, and it's the copper money that we're not seeing. So we can go on these red herring assignments of fighting off inequalities in areas that don't really impact on our economy. So Zambia must get the benefit of its copper production Angola must get the benefit of its oil production. Zimbabwe must get the benefits of its gold production. And this is really what matters in the bigger picture. So we must also be very careful not to be sidelined by areas of trade and commerce that we have very little control over, when really for Zambia, the copper mining industry is the one we ought to be harnessing as far as revenue generation is concerned for taxes, and even as far as recapitalizing our own economies. So to me, I think that's the direction we ought to be looking at as far as taking Zambia forward in economic development.
Yusuf Dadio, always good talking to you. Thank you so much indeed. Zikomo kwambiri.
Thank you very much, and you have a good night. Zikomo.
Thank you.